So our second afternoon session will be led and moderated by invited speaker Naniette Coleman, sitting to my left here, a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of California Berkeley, and a multi-year UC National Laboratory Graduate Fellow at Los Alamos. She's the only social scientist ever selected for this distinction in the history of the program. Naniette's work sits at the intersection of the sociology of culture and organizations and focuses on cybersecurity, surveillance, and privacy in the US context. She examines how organizations assess risk, make decisions, and respond to data breaches, and organizational compliance with state, federal, and international privacy laws. Naniette is the recipient of numerous academic and professional service honors, including the K. Patricia Cross Future Leaders Award from the American Association of Colleges and Universities, the Berkeley Chancellor's Award for Public Service, the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Excellence, the Alumni Public Sociology Award, the Presidential Management Fellowship, and the President's Lifetime Volunteer Service Award. Her current academic and professional service commitments include founding and leading the first Summer Institute in Computational Social Science at a historically Black college and sitting on the Board of Trustees for Science Counts. Naniette holds a Master's of Public Administration with a specialization in democracy, politics, and institutions from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, an MA in economics, and a BA in communication from UB. A non-traditional student, Naniette's prior professional experience includes local, state, and federal service, as well as work for 2 international organizations and 2 separate universities. She will be joined by her amazing cohort of student activists. Please welcome Naniette Coleman.
It is an honor and a privilege to return to Western New York and my favorite alma mater, the University at Buffalo. Anybody who's ever met me knows this is my favorite place. Y'all get all my money, my body for science, whatever. I'm so excited to be here for this first annual symposium. Admittedly, I'm particularly tickled that I'm also here with several of my current and former research assistants. I would be remiss if I did not thank them first and foremost for flying in from Northern and Southern California, Washington, D.C., and Las Vegas. They stepped away from studying for finals, a surgical residency, a law firm job, and a job at Pew to be here. I am like the least educated of this group. While I do not say it often, I think they know that one of the greatest joys of my life is learning alongside them and watching them all soar in their own ways. I would also be remiss if I did not also generally thank our hosts at the Center for Information Integrity and our dedicated sponsors, friends, and family collectively for your belief in us and unwavering support. As with most things, it takes a village, and we are collectively thankful to all the folks that are part of our family. And I'm very proud to see a couple folks that I know and love who are in the audience who are part of my UB family. Because I hate not knowing where the speaker is going, let me provide a roadmap. I will begin by sharing brief contextualizing remarks, as brief as an academic can be. Then I will introduce these 6 incredible humans who will speak for about 45 minutes about our lab, and then we'll take your questions for around 15 minutes. Sound good? Yes? Great. Let's get started. Admit it. You found and shared some sort of information in the last few months that you thought was real and ended up being fake. Hands up, admit it. Anyone? Okay, few brave souls, okay. So maybe those people that raised their hands were the lucky ones. You figured it out all by yourselves instead of what happened to me. A colleague / former friend called me out about the information's origin. I shared a random tweet a friend shared from someone neither of us knew. I admit it. Still, the rest of you are going to just lie, I'm imagining, but we know you did it. I shared the photo of the Pope in a very swaggy, overstuffed white puffer jacket with a hefty-looking cross on Cuban links. Not exactly the normal swag of the Pope. Knowing me, I was probably thinking that finally the Holy See had a Pope that was cool as UB's own leather jacket-wearing, Jesus hair-having Father Pat. If you don't know him, he's amazing. Or maybe I was just imagining some well-meaning younger priest, no one is cool, as David's uncle, Father Rodriguez, trying to get His Holiness to remain hip and relevant. Whatever the case may be, I saw the photo, I guffawed, I snortled, that's chortling with a twist, snickered, and then shared. I did not check who this person was and what their intentions might be. We have all done it. According to researcher Matthew Azure Lawson, an assistant professor of decision sciences at INSEAD, in his piece in the Journal of Experimental Psychology Journal, I quote, "Conformity, social pressure are key motivators of the spread of fake news. Because some in my online tribe shared this fake photo, then I most likely felt pressure to share it as well, even though I didn't know whether it was false or true." Hopefully that makes the rest of you who did not raise your hands feel better about the mistake you also made and are not admitting. But let's talk about it. So what struck me, in addition to the speed of my gullibility, was the speed at which I shared this. It was fake. I shared it really fast. Now, granted, this was fairly low stakes situation. Is that slides? Let's go back to that slide. Fairly low stakes situation, sharing a picture of the Holy Father dressed like a triple fat goose wearing 1980s New York rap artist. This was not a big deal, right? But while this situation caused no harm and no foul, save for my ego, when I saw the picture in the New York Times the next day, it could have been worse. It can very quickly get worse when a misinformed individual catastrophic action, something like believing in white replacement theory in a supermarket in Buffalo, leads to tragic consequences. Going back to our lighthearted example, the artist of the accidentally viral papal art piece was shocked that it went viral. He posted this AI-generated image on Reddit and Facebook and probably forgot about it. He actually passed out. I believe he was doing mushrooms. Upon realization, he shared that the experience helped him realize the potential impact of AI-generated images, as he hadn't even thought about that before. He went on to say, and I quote, "It's definitely going to get serious if they don't start implementing laws to regulate this." A recent deepfake video of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky telling his troops to surrender tells us we can't just wait on regulation. We are long past that. While I appreciate the importance of regulation, we, the grand we, are here to offer another solution today. As I shared during my contribution to the Academic Minute in 2022, the proliferation of deepfakes, fake news, fake data sets, and even fake academic journals makes it harder to trust the information we encounter online. While well-researched answers to questions with myriad citations that make all of us academics very happy, especially when they're ours, are always out there, so are extra deliciously convincing conspiracy theory clickbait. Add to that eroding barriers between fact, opinion, and fiction in our digital world, and it's no wonder why many Americans are deeply concerned about our democracy. According to a 2022 Pew study of 19 advanced economies, the medium seemed to be the message, as Marshall McLuhan theorized. Quote, "Most thought social media was actually what made it easier to manipulate and divide people. And while that was tempered by the belief that, quote, social media also informs and raises awareness, social media was looked at in this study as both a constructive and destructive force, but to different degrees by different populations. Since we're in the United States, proximate to Canada, but we're here, let's consider the world and us. While across the 19 countries polled, a median of 57% said social media had been more of a good thing for their democracy, with 35% saying it had been a bad thing. In the United States, just 34% of US adults think social media has been good for democracy, while 64% say it has had a bad impact. In fact, the US is an outlier on a number of measures, with larger shares of Americans seeing social media as divisive. But don't just take the importance of this issue from me or Pew, which would be Ash's employer. Exactly 1 year ago today, exactly on April 21st, 2022, former US President Barack Obama spoke to a packed gathering sponsored by the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies and the Cyber Policy Center in the heart of Silicon Valley. He was introduced by Institute Director and former US Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. In that critical moment in our history where much of the world was focused on Russia, troops had just entered Ukraine less than 2 months earlier, Barack Obama focused the majority of his remarks on what Ambassador McFaul called, and I quote, "if not one of, it is the most important issue of our time for anyone that cares about democracy." Barack Obama discussed misinformation. Excerpts from his remarks are as follows. "The internet and the accompanying information revolution have been transformative and there is no turning back. But like all advances in technology, this progress has had unintended consequences. Our new information ecosystem is turbocharging some of humanity's worst impulses. It is the consequence of billions of humans suddenly plunged into an instant 24/7 global information stream. Our brains are not accustomed to taking in so much information this fast, and a lot of us are experiencing overload. The sheer proliferation of content and the splintering of information and audiences has made democracy more complicated." And I quote, "Search and social media platforms aren't just our window into the internet. They serve as our primary source of news and information. No one told us that the window is blurred, subject to unforeseen distortions and subtle manipulations. All we see is a constant stream of content where useful, factual information and happy diversions of those cat videos we all love flow alongside lies, conspiracy theories, junk science, quackery, white supremacy, and racist tracks and misogynist screeds. And over time, we lose our capacity to distinguish between fact, opinion, and wholesale fiction." I quote, "Today, we occupy entirely different media realities fed directly into our phones, and it's made us more prone to what psychologists call confirmation bias, the tendency to select facts and opinions that reinforce our pre-existing worldviews and filter out those that don't. So inside our personal information bubbles, we'll talk about that later, our assumptions, our blind spots, our prejudices aren't challenged, they are reinforced. And meanwhile, this is happening under the watchful eye of sophisticated actors, political consultants, commercial interests, intelligence arms of foreign powers, and game platform algorithms that artificially boost the reach of deceptive or harmful messages." He finishes, understand it's not necessary for people to believe this information in order to weaken democratic institutions. You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage. Use that to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing, and citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game is won. Or in my case, I would say lost. Former Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano sounded a similar alarm way back in 2017. This was a year after our lab was founded, when she, in her capacity as president of the University of California system, called on faculty to determine the best means beyond your research and work in the classroom to help the public distinguish between evil, discredited ideologies and the voice of reason, tolerance, and moderation. She also reminded that all of us in this higher education community must do more to counteract misinformation and outright bigotry. Not convinced by Pew, a Homeland Security Secretary, or count them 1-2 presidents. I count Janet as a president. Who knows? How about some research? Research also abounds in this arena by scholars like Chris Bale, a mentor of mine, Dean Freeland, Letitia Bode, Gordon Pennycook, and David Rand. Bale, a prominent voice in the fight to make platforms less polarized. Freeland challenging the foregone echo chambers or the issue conclusion. Bode, with co-authors Varga and Tully, examining the effects of exposure to misinformation, as well as correction effects, and Rand and Pennycook discussing the effects of prior exposure to perceived accuracy on fake news, and arguing that mental laziness is often what prevents us from thinking critically about what we read on Facebook, in my case, the picture, or in the headlines of our favorite news outlets. The latter being a theory that our lab's work and my approach directly counters. We propose a mental and a digital workout that puts power into the hands of the people to recognize and counter what they see. What you will find once I finish my introduction, aren't you laughing that was just the introduction, is illuminations, I'm almost done, illuminations on how IRGP, the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy, not only theorizes on how to build resilience, capacity, confidence, and a counterbalance through direct individual action on issues where conspiracy and complexity might lead to misinformation, but it's also actually doing it. We've been at it for 7 years. At the intersection of the possibility of construction and destruction, use and misuse, the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy / Coleman Research Lab, an award-winning Berkeley-based student-powered and empowering initiative founded in 2017, was born, and as Janet Napolitano said, we decided to take action to correct misinformation into our own hands. Now more than ever, all of us, but especially college faculty and students, need opportunities to develop digital literacy skills that help us decipher and interrogate the maelstrom of information we all encounter daily. While many are looking to Congress and the White House for solutions right now, which, while valid options, ignores the fact that policy lags woefully behind tech and probably always will, we believe we must also embrace direct action. This giant collective action problem will persist until we grasp opportunities as individual concerned citizens to chip away at the problem steadily and methodologically and methodically. So obviously, instead of looking to Washington, our team will be discussing how we use Wikipedia to counter misinformation. I know what you're thinking. Can I trust Wikipedia? Can't like everyone edit that? Yes, anyone can edit it. That's the beauty of it, actually. It's the wisdom of crowds at work. In 1907, statistician Francis Galton realized that with a bunch of people participating in a crowd at a fair, they could guess the weight of an ox faster. Apparently, they had lots of fun in 1907. Individual guesses varied widely, but the average was just 1 pound from the answer. The term coined by journalist James Surulewecki, I probably butchered that, was the wisdom of crowds. In other words, individual noise can be aggregated and produce remarkably accurate information. If Pew, a Homeland Security Secretary, 2 presidents, the Pope, sort of, lots of research and math didn't convince you, I'll jump to the final astrophysics option. Neil deGrasse Tyson calls the hard science sociology. He famously said, in science, when human behavior enters the equation, things go nonlinear. That's why physics is easy and sociology is hard. This is something I say at Los Alamos National Lab to my colleagues a lot, and they don't like it. The late Eric Olin Wright, a former president of the American Sociological Association, was a fan of Wikipedia. In his A Call to Duty ASA in the Wikipedia Initiative in 2011, he famously called sociologists to action on Wikipedia, calling it a real utopia that embodied ideals of equality, open access, participation, and deliberation in a domination-free environment. He also provided a salve for skeptics. I recommend you read that if you have not. What the incredible panel of my students, graduate students, and professional colleagues, I should just call them all colleagues now, we'll be discussing in a few moments are 2 of the ways we have helped students see how they can make access to information on privacy, cybersecurity, and surveillance, in particular, more equitable and actively fight misinformation in the process. We are excited to show you how we embody Barack Obama's suggestion last year that we, as citizens, take it upon ourselves to become better consumers of news, looking at sources, thinking before we share, and teaching. He says our children, I say others, to become critical thinkers who know how to evaluate sources and separate opinion from fact. I am very proud to introduce our panel of experts. To my left immediately is Maddie Chen, a 4th-year undergraduate student studying computer science at the University of California Berkeley and minoring in Chinese language. Since joining in fall 2020, Maddie has served as a research assistant, project lead, and lab manager in the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy. Maddie plans to pursue a career in software engineering after graduation. Please ask her about her job at Amazon. And in her free time, enjoys playing volleyball and crocheting. To her left is Frankie Colosimo. Her dad told me it's Colosimo. We're going to go with Colosimo. Is currently a 3rd-year medical student at the Kerkorian School of Medicine in Las Vegas. She received her BA in psychology from Berkeley in 2020. Frankie began working for the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy as a research assistant her sophomore year, then as a lab manager for the remainder of her time at Berkeley. It was known amongst our team that if I was not present, Frankie was in charge as a sophomore. She maintains close ties with the lab through various writing projects focused on medical adjacent topics. In her limited free time, Frankie enjoys reading, gardening, and collecting vinyl albums. Savannah Cragen, to her left, is currently pursuing her MLIS at San Jose State University. That's a Master of Library and Information Science, is that correct? Yep, cool. and has her BA in Media Studies from the University of California, Berkeley. Savannah joined IRGP in spring 2018 as a research assistant and later served as both an undergraduate research fellow and Wikipedia coordinator. Additionally, she has worked with the American Culture Center at UC Berkeley as a Wikipedia peer fellow. I think they called her Wikipedian in residence. That's what I think, because that's what she was. And to assist instructors with Wikipedia-based assignments. Savannah has been working with the CCCC, or is that quadruple C? Four C's Wikipedia initiative since December 2020, bringing with her several years of UCB-based Wikipedia editing and teaching experience. In her free time, Savannah enjoys hiking Northern California, solving crossword puzzles, or trying to, and cooking with friends. To her left is Ankita. Ankita is a senior at Berkeley studying data science and cognitive science. She first joined IRGP in June 2020 and worked on the privacy literacy project before joining the lab leadership team from August 2020 through June 2021. She may not mention this, but at one point she was single-handedly helping us run the project for, was it like 40 people? 40, we'll go with 40. It was 40. She's passionate about telling stories with data, making data-driven decisions, and creating more transparency with the individuals about their data use. After graduating, she hopes to start a career in the tech industry and continue to pursue her interest in research. So interest in research says somebody should talk to her about a PhD program, I'm just saying. Ashtan is a data analyst for digital strategy at Pew Research Center. He received a Master of Information in Data Science from Berkeley School of Information, as well as Bachelor of Arts in Data Science and a Bachelor of Arts in Cognitive Science from Berkeley. Ash participated in the IRGP first as a research assistant specializing in neuroprivacy, and subsequently as a data analyst for the IRGP leadership team during his undergraduate career. And we will finish, there's only one more of you, right? Okay, yeah, there's a lot of them. Ava received her Bachelor of Arts in French and Molecular and Cell Biology from Berkeley. Ava served as a research assistant and project lead in IRGP, focusing on bridging knowledge gaps across languages and cultures. She continues to support the research group, deftly managing social media and video content for the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science, the Howard Mathematica site. Outside of the lab, Ava is a paralegal in an international law firm and plans to pursue her JD. In her free time, she is learning, wait for this, modern Greek and Mandarin Chinese. How many languages do you speak? Fingers, how many? Yeah, she loves languages. And it is my pleasure to turn the microphone fully over to these incredible 6 people.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Privacy, or IRGP, or the Coleman Lab. It was founded in 2016 by Naniette Coleman, a PhD candidate in sociology. The lab hosts a virtual, standalone, discovery-oriented, and semester-long research and professional skills training program that focuses on the dissemination of public knowledge on and around privacy, cyber surveillance topics. So how do we do that? We have 2 Wikipedia projects. One is focused on a domestic audience and the other an international audience that focuses on around 9 different languages. And we also have an extension of that work, the Annotation Database Project, which focuses on using the references curated during the Wikipedia assignments and making them publicly available through an annotation database. So a little bit about our mission. The IRGP proceeds from the conviction that high-level, peer-reviewed research should be available to everyone, everywhere, regardless of prior experience. Our lab is comprised of mostly women and students of color throughout history, and we focus on creating a small, inclusive experience for students who are looking to gain skills both within research and outside of research. And there's a picture there of one of the first cohorts. So today we'll discuss some lab statistics about the demographics and trajectory of the lab throughout history, our 2 Wikipedia privacy literacy projects, as well as students' experiences contributing to those projects, complements and extensions to this work, including a university-wide editathon that's hosted at Cal that the lab contributes to, and the Annotation Database Project, notable impacts and awards, as well as what's next for the lab.
Yeah, so some stats about the lab. We have a very diverse range of members. In my first year as a research assistant for the lab, I was struck by the number of backgrounds and perspectives of the students I was working with. As the slide says, the lab is predominantly comprised of women and/or people of color. and people of all different types of identities and affinity groups, such as uh, first-generation students, multi-generation students, international students, non-traditional adult students, athletes. List goes on and on. Undocumented students, disabled students, mono and multilingual students. And that made for a really unique working group and a lot of interesting conversations. And that's all very intentional. Only about 20% of Wikipedia editors are women or people of color. And so this is one of our goals, is to diversify that population of contributors and editors to Wikipedia. So we specifically recruit for people of these different affinity groups by reaching out to organizations in and beyond the UC Berkeley umbrella. So that means that we've had research assistants from Wellesley, from University of Chicago, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and of course, University at Buffalo. Yeah, and if we want to look at a little breakdown of students of the IRGP, we can see that in terms of majors, sociology is very well represented, but there's also a pretty broad distribution of different interests and majors. I think something especially of note is we're pretty split along the STEM humanities. There's a pretty equal distribution there, and I think that speaks to how universal of a concept and a concern privacy is to all sorts of different people. If we want to look at academic status, we can also see that there's a pretty even split there, which is fairly unique for a research lab at UC Berkeley. Typically, you'll usually see more of a higher proportion or concentration of sophomores or juniors, just because some labs steer away from recruiting freshmen or seniors, either too little experience or too much experience, but we approach it with a teaching mentality. We think that everyone should have this opportunity to learn about misinformation in Wikipedia, and we're happy to teach.
All right. So over the 7 years that IRGP has been around, there have been two major projects that the group has worked on, and those are the Privacy Literacy Project, or PLP, and the International Privacy Literacy Project, IPLP. In the Privacy Literacy Project, students create a novel Wikipedia page on a topic of their choice related to privacy, cybersecurity, or surveillance, and they create that article based off academic peer-reviewed journals collected primarily through the UC Berkeley database. In the International Privacy Literacy Project, people take existing Wikipedia pages on these topics as well and translate them to other languages. So we're taking articles that are primarily written in English and trying to make them available in as many languages as possible.
And this is just a quick visual on the courses we've hosted over the years. Naniette has hosted a lot of courses with the Wiki Education Foundation. And so you can see in the beginning, we were still figuring out the optimal length for how long it would take a student to write their article. And some were a little too short, some were really long. And after, even a summer experiment, we decided on one academic semester. And you can also see when the second project, the International Privacy Literacy Project, was introduced, and that's about the same length.
So a little bit more about PLP and IPLP. It's now offered to both undergraduate and graduate students. And it's a 12-week guided training program that is hosted by an asynchronous training program facilitated by the Wiki Education Foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports faculty-led Wikipedia assignments in the classroom. So alongside this asynchronous training program, students complete an annotated bibliography on their selected topic related to privacy. They also peer review several article drafts of their other collab cohort members. They create a subjective blog post about their experience editing Wikipedia, and they also create and present a final presentation on their topic and experience. Students gain confidence in these assignments by becoming knowledge producers. So they're able to see themselves in the academic writing process. They also are allowed to bring knowledge from behind the academic firewall, which is really powerful. And they also become leaders in this work by creating organizational documents for the lab moving forward.
a little bit about the student experience. So one of the major sources of pride for IRGP is that it's a very much student-led group. And it's a group that's led by students meant to teach other students. So incoming new research assistants aren't required to have any research experience coming in, which is honestly kind of rare for a research group at UC Berkeley. And it's kind of ironic that you need experience to gain experience. So this is a nice place for students to kind of get their feet wet and hit the ground running. And so new students come in and have everything that they need to know to be successful in the lab is taught to them in the lab, which is really nice. And so new students, as was mentioned, start working on one of the PLP projects, and all work is done fully remote. Students can work anywhere around the world, any time zone, and the only requirement is our weekly meetings that are over Zoom so anyone can attend, and to go over progress over the week, any questions, concerns, and how things are going along in that regard. And after their first semester, students have the opportunity to return to the lab as part of the leadership team and take on more either administrative roles in the lab, doing budgeting, agenda setting, and general lab management, or they can take on a lead on one of the projects and kind of oversee the work of new students who are coming in. So some of the skills and other things that students get to work on during the lab are writing and research skills, like working on annotated bibliography, editing, translating, and general professional and research guided research, reading research articles, and then translating those work into their own words. As far as professional skills, a lot of collaborative interprofessional work, resourcefulness and problem solving, as well as critical thinking, adaptability, and public speaking.
Now we will delve into two specific semesters in review. So in fall 2020, it was the first fully remote school semester at the height of the pandemic, but our lab was able to seamlessly transition to a fully remote format, and we actually had the largest number of students working on the privacy literacy project thus far, which was 25 students. We had one PLP leadership team member, and 18 of the members were women. And on the slide, you can see all of the unique articles that were worked on during that semester. And just to call out a few, we had mutual authentication, artificial intelligence in hiring, as well as web browsing history. Now we'll move on to spring 2021 in review. So this semester, we had 12 students working on unique topics, and we were still continuing in a fully remote format. We had 9 junior leadership team members, and these were students who had completed the project in the previous semester. And they were paired with new students in order to guide them through the process of working on their articles and being someone that they could lean on and reach out to with questions that they had about the process, which kind of fostered a sense of community. We also had 5 women working on articles this semester, and just to call out some of the unique topics, we had deepfakes and predatory advertising. And on this slide, there's quite a lot of articles listed, and these are all of the articles for the PLP Wikipedia project that have been completed to date. And just to call out some of the articles here, we have click tracking, data sanitization, the Hancock programming language, participatory surveillance, postmortem privacy, privacy settings, and smudge attack.
And now all of us who were involved with the Privacy Literacy Project will talk a little bit about their experience. So I'm Maddie, and I worked on an article for mutual authentication. When I first joined the project, I was particularly interested in looking for topics in cybersecurity. And so I was really excited when I got assigned mutual authentication. And that is essentially a security concept where both parties that will begin communication first authenticate each other, as opposed to a one-sided authentication like in a password login situation. So if we had two parties, A and B, A would first ask B for their authentication token or a digital certificate, and then they would verify B's identity. If all checked out, then B would do the same to A, ask for their certificate, and verify their identity. In a general protocol, this added step of mutual authentication is really helpful for adding security. However, it does bring the trade-off of added security or added runtime and computation. So that's why it's not always defaultly added into a lot of communication protocols. And throughout the process, as a computer science student, I wasn't really used to reading academic articles and analyzing them. And since my topic was in technology, a lot of the journals I was reading were very just algorithm filled. There's a lot of math, and so it was really hard to digest. So getting used to that took some time. But eventually I learned how to pull out information about my topic. Because it's a security concept, mutual authentication usually isn't the main focus of a lot of articles. And so I had to learn how to pull out information about my topic within a larger context. And when I was first assigned to this article, it was a stub page on Wikipedia, which essentially means it's too short and incomplete. So there was really only a definition and not really any credible sources. So throughout this process, it was really rewarding to be able to contribute a lot of sources to the article, which is a big criteria on Wikipedia articles, and also post my bibliography to the talk page and discuss with other members who were editing that page what we found was the best information to add to this article. And through the wiki education format, I also got to peer review other people's articles. So it was a really cool chance to learn more about other privacy topics and also see what types of information people were including with their lens on privacy. And I also got more experience just interacting with Wikipedia in general. I'm sure a lot of us are you either started out as or still are just consumers of information on Wikipedia. You kind of read it and think that it's a magical place where articles magically appear. But it was cool getting a behind the scenes look into how articles are actually drafted, how people discuss with each other what they think is worth putting on the pages or what maybe needs more citation. And overall, just it was cool seeing how community members on Wikipedia interact. And next, I'll hand it over to Frankie.
All right. So I think when people hear the term postmortem privacy, I think their initial knee-jerk reaction is that's a little odd and morbid. And while it is uncomfortable and a little taboo to talk about death and what happens when we're dead, I think it's an important thing to talk about because especially now as our lives become more and more entwined in our online persona and experience, we have to give a little more consideration to how our image, how our lives, in a sense, continue even though we are no longer here. And so when I started this article, I focused on three main areas, digital assets being one. And I think social media is the big one that comes to mind for all of us. But also think about all your subscription services, who pays their bills in person or over the mail now. So many things that you do online and require some kind of online presence. I also focus on medical records and medical privacy, which also includes autopsy photos, reports, toxicology reports, things like that. And then the last part I talk about is postmortem publicity, which is kind of an extension of postmortem privacy that's really geared towards people who have a more public appearance, celebrities and stuff like that, whose persona and image is kind of guided differently than any of ours would be. It's hard to manage the privacy of someone's life when their life is kind of part of the public view. So those were the three areas that I focused primarily on in my article. And as I was doing my research and looking into these topics, I found that the answers to these questions, what is your right to privacy after death in all of these areas, weren't so clear cut and universal as one maybe would have hoped for. And so there can be a lot of variation, especially with digital assets, for example. A lot of that is governed by individual companies' terms and service agreements, things like that. With medical records, yes, we have HIPAA provisions, but there's also some variation in state law on how those kinds of things are dictated and disseminated. And then when it comes to celebrities and public personas, there's not much to go off of in the sense of how we determine how we're going to portray someone who is in the public eye still. So we can think of Marilyn Monroe, who has passed several decades ago, but her image is still plastered everywhere, and she's still one of the biggest images in pop culture. So thinking about how we're going to disseminate and keep track of those kinds of things is important. And while maybe we don't have all the answers that we want right now, I think it's important for us to think about those things and think about how we're presenting ourselves now and what things we're making available now and how those things could really be immortalized in a way that they wouldn't have been prior to this rapid expansion of technology and the internet. So while I was doing this project, it required me to do a lot of digging through very dense legal documentation and just overall articles and research that had a lot of jargon and not very accessible language, I guess. So to make sense of this work and then translate it to an article on Wikipedia was kind of like a twofold process. First, I had to understand what the heck I was reading and try to make sense of it myself. And then I had to take that knowledge and translate it into an accessible article that anybody could look up and reasonably make sense of themselves. So there's a bit of a learning curve on both of those things. And working on this project, I think, gave me such an advantage in being able to catapult my own research skills and being able to make sense of information that isn't very accessible and then be able to make it accessible to other people. And that's a skill that I continue to use throughout my career as a medical student. Part of my job is learning how to teach people very complex topics. So having that experience and having the ability to do that is so essential in really any academic stage. So a really great experience in that regard. So I'll pass it over to Ash next.
Yeah. So neuroprivacy is a little out there. So to set the stage for this, when I was picking my topic, I was in the middle of taking a lot of cognitive science classes. There was a lot of headlines popping up about Neuralink and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all of that. And I just finished the Three-Body Problem trilogy. So I had a lot of brain stuff in my head. But so I wanted to learn more about the ethical side of the technology. And so I picked this as my topic. And the more I learned about it, the more complicated it became to put together this article. Because, yes, there is a lot of controversy over brain machine interfacing, a la Neuralink. But there's so much more than that. There's courtroom admissibility of MRI data, there's lie detection, there's predictive policing and diagnoses, there's brain fingerprinting, there's subliminal marketing, there's a whole list. There's like so many things that this encapsulates. And for each one of those, you have to talk about the technology behind it. You have to talk about the history behind this, the ethical concerns, legal precedents. So when you're thinking about putting together a Wikipedia article with all of this stuff, you have to start balancing, well, how do I make this the right depth along with the right breadth and also make it readable to the general public? Yeah, so that was a challenge. And it was really helpful to have a group of peers who were essentially working on the same problem with their own topics and going through that peer review process, talking it out, getting other people's opinions, but also getting to read other people's work and seeing how their minds put things together, how they organized different articles. Again, sort of going back to wisdom of crowds. It really helped. And also the process of looking at existing Wikipedia articles. There's a lot of little things you don't notice when you're just scrolling through Wikipedia looking for a piece of information versus when you're critically examining an article for how is it structured? How is the language used here? So those were a lot of things that I had to learn in addition to all of the papers from legal and neuroscience journals and all of that. So I learned a lot, and I hope other people will learn things from the neuroprivacy page too.
I just want to touch on first this general sense of like feeling really scared to edit when you first start out. I think, or I knew I didn't know we were doing a Wikipedia assignment when I joined the lab. And then that sprung it on me. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I'm qualified. Definitely have, a lot of weird feelings about putting out something I wrote to a public audience that could live there for the foreseeable future. So it was really scary getting started, but I have to say that the fact that it's a 12-week program and going step by step and the encouragement from the Wiki Education Foundation, as well as, my peers and Naniette were super helpful in making me feel like, yes, I am someone who has the power and agency to be a contributor to public knowledge. So that being said, I created the article on participatory surveillance, and I was really interested in sort of the intersection between social media and privacy, studying media studies at Cal. And I just wanted to kind of, explore Wikipedia and see what content gaps existed within that space. And as I was sorting through a bunch of different articles, I kept seeing this big red link pop up for participatory surveillance. And those red links mean that, the community says there should be an article on this, but there just isn't one. So that immediately to me was like, okay, well, this is really important. We should get this out there. I knew nothing about it at the time, but I found out that it is basically just a social phenomena where people extract information from people's social media and web presences. So finding out how people can utilize that information to either do harm or good really impacts their privacy, because they have no control over it and they don't know what people are going to use against them, or if even without their consent for whatever reason. As I was writing the article, I realized, and doing research, I quickly realized that it's not just, part of digital media studies. There's also, it's also used in medical science, in infodemiology, which was just coming out as this emerging, subfield at the time, which infodemiology is when you track outbreaks using social media platforms. So basically seeing who's talking about their illnesses online and like where is that localized. And I had no idea how important that would become during the global pandemic. There's also a huge way this is used in ecological field studies, where scientists just can't get to a really rural or remote part of the world. And so they ask people, either indigenous people who live there or just rural communities, to help track, different kinds of research. So that was really interesting to let my research develop over time and see how interdisciplinary it was. It was not something I was expecting. And when you're writing an encyclopedia article, you have to have, the full body of the topic needs to be present. So it was a lot of going in between different types of journals, and seeing, how do I make this really clear, concise, and also expansive. So that's been really fun. It was a great experience. It made me want to pursue a career in engaging people to do this work as a form of citation equity and justice, as well as social justice in general. I think students have a lot of power to be knowledge producers and just don't realize it yet.
For my PLP project, I worked on click tracking, which is when users' clicks online are tracked for analysis and insights. So, to learn more about this topic and create a robust article, I had to look into a wide variety of surrounding topics around the sort of general realm of click tracking. So, those were tracking and recording technologies, methods, and user psychology and click behavior. And this was a really perfect topic for me because, as a data and cognitive science major, I was really interested in the intersection and the opportunity to combine my interests in human computer interaction as well as analytics. I also looked into a lot of applications of this research. So, whether that was in search result optimization, in advertising, or in email. And this was my first research experience after coming to college. I joined the lab right after my freshman year. So I learned a lot about reading tough academic literature, as well as how to really leverage and use UC Berkeley's resources and databases, because this was something I had no experience in prior. I also learned a lot about how to use really good search terms when you're going into these databases, as well as how parsing this kind of material is incredibly tough. And some of the articles that I had to learn in were really niche. So sort of taking that information that's incredibly niche and sort of building a robust article around that topic and making sure that it's just the right amount of general enough so that people can learn from it and take something away from it without feeling too overwhelmed. I also learned a lot throughout the entire learning process about iterative drafting, as well as the peer reviewing process, because we worked on our drafts week by week instead of sort of putting together one article all at once, which was really helpful to incorporate feedback from my peers, as well as learn about what it takes to build a good article. And it was also a really rewarding experience, not only seeing my article come together, but also my peers' articles come together, kind of the sense of community, and that was really helpful as well.
So, as we're working on the privacy literacy project, we are also recognizing that our work lives on English Wikipedia. We've talked about accessibility, how one of our goals is to bring this privacy research from behind the academic firewall and translate it into something that is more digestible to the general public. Well, how can we make it more accessible? Translate it into other languages so that different linguistic communities can also benefit from this research. So this brings us to the International Privacy Literacy Project, or IPLP. Since its inception in, I believe, 2019, with Savannah and Seth, one of our other lab members, we have had 18 students, 12 of whom are women, editing in 8 different languages on Wikipedia. We have grown from 1 leadership member overseeing the project to having 3. And our talented students have edited Wikipedia in Danish, French, Greek, Italian, Korean, Mandarin, Spanish, and Telugu. So there are 3 components to the IPLP project. The first component is translation. We translate from English to one of the other languages that we know, the lab-generated articles that the students in Privacy Literacy Project have written. We build up this bank of content, and then we also edit the articles so that they conform to the different ways that, say, French Wikipedia prefers their articles to be formatted. So that includes updating the citations. We've talked about how in these articles we're looking for a research that supports what we're writing in the article. And that is helpful for, people in English Wikipedia when they want to go read that source themselves. They can click on the link and find it. As you can imagine, if we're editing in French Wikipedia, not everyone who speaks French also knows English. So we also try to update those articles so that we're finding research that those stakeholders can read. The second component of the project is the how. How do we actually put this onto Wikipedia and make it accessible to those communities? So we start to explore these different Wikipedias. We go in, interact, get our hands dirty, and our students create a toolkit. And that toolkit includes not just how to upload an article, press this button, it looks like this, it's like a blue box or something, but also what are the different citation styles that they prefer? What are the different policies on images and copyright? Are there specific nuances to the translations? Maybe best practices that translation software hasn't quite caught yet. And lastly, also the views on privacy in those different cultures. We include a cultural literacy component because, well, a lot of our research focuses on the US and the UK, but people in other cultures might have different views on privacy. And that's our third component. As we were interacting with these different Wikipedia communities and receiving feedback, we want to be mindful of the cultures where our translated work would live. Again, a lot of the work on English Wikipedia is US and UK centric, but there are a whole bunch of other cultures in the world, and we want to make sure that those stakeholders were included. Which brings us to cross-cultural exchange. So I forgot to mention, we have a second column up there, which is translating from English. Those are all of the articles that we have translated. Those were originally written in English by members of the lab, and then members of the lab also translated them and hosted them. So you can go to Korean Wikipedia and find connected toys on there. And then the third column over here are the articles that we have translated from other Wikipedia. They were written by other people on those Wikipedia, on those languages. And then we translated them into English and posted them onto English Wikipedia. So we have this cross-cultural exchange where we can include other perspectives, not just the ones from the US or from the UK, but also, let's say, what are the Korean views on privacy? What are the views on privacy from Chinese-speaking communities? And as you can see there, we have several COVID apps because we included this project when there was a whole bunch of COVID tracking apps and the privacy concerns with that. So overall, this project is very exploratory, and it's a lesson for students to that they don't need to be completely fluent. We don't ask anyone to be, a master in that language, because Wikipedia is totally okay with, making mistakes, learning from other people. But to operate in good faith and to practice the language, to deeply engage with the culture and understand the different perspectives. So I'll talk a little bit about my specific experience working on the project. I am a language and linguistics nerd. I studied French in college, took a couple classes in modern Greek. I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a multilingual household. And in college, I was working with language exchange international students. So this is something that really drew me to this project. It's this language and cultural aspect. I joined in the summer of 2020 with a focus on French Wikipedia. I revised the translation that someone else had done of connected toys. So connected toys, those are toys that can connect to Bluetooth, Wi-Fi networks. As you can imagine, those aren't really terms that come up in 19th century literature. So it was a really interesting exercise in expanding my own vocabulary of these languages that, I thought I knew. I could write, academic articles about, Victor Hugo's work other than Les Mis, but Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, those are words that we're actually using every day. And it was really interesting to actually pick up those words. I was learning how to solve problems and communicate with people who I don't know and people who are speaking a completely different language. For some reason, my IP address was blocked by French Wikipedia before I even joined it, so I had to go and ask them to unblock me and convince them that I was not malicious. That was also interesting, trying to do that in a language that is not my first. And as I was exploring French Wikipedia, Greek Wikipedia, I was really appreciating the differences. So not all Wikipedias are set up the same. There are similarities, but there are also considerable differences. So something that the French Wikipedia has, for instance, they have a page that is just of terms to be careful of, because one of the pillars of Wikipedia is neutrality, and they maybe have seen this as a problem, and they literally just put a whole bunch of words. These are words that you should be careful of. If you're using them in the article, maybe go back and take another look. Also, as I was reading these different articles, I was finding discussions that maybe we don't really have in English Wikipedia. For instance, Anglicisms. There's been talk, of English being a lingua franca and how that's maybe contributing to a decline in linguistic diversity. French doesn't, we don't expect French to go away anytime soon, but they have that problem where there are terms people use every day. It will be an Anglicism, such as phishing, like spam phishing. That is the descriptive term. But if you go look in the dictionary, it will be hameçonnage, which is a term that people know, but it's not really the term that they would use in everyday speak. So people in the discussion parts of those articles, they will talk about, well, should we call it this term, or should we call it this term because it's what people use? And they start to come to compromises and say, oh, we'll list, both, or like if someone searches the article, it should come up both. Other things that come up, linguistic diversity within the language. So, for instance, the term 90, like the number, in metropolitan French, we would say 90, but then if you were in a different part, say Switzerland, it would be like 90. Very different things. Even if you don't speak French, you can tell those are very different. And they have a policy where, okay, if you see someone writing it one way, don't change it, because it's not necessarily wrong. It's just a different way of describing it. And people generally know what they're talking about. Sort of similarly, well, actually, not similarly, but as I was exploring Greek Wikipedia, I was noticing articles about privacy topics that we didn't really have in English, at least at the time that I was looking at it. So Greek Wikipedia had an article about voting privacy that was fairly fleshed out, but we didn't really have a similar page in English Wikipedia at the time. So that's just sort of an example of how, different languages, different cultures, they will have different views on privacy, different emphasis that they will put. I also briefly want to shout out Vinaya, who is also on this slide. Vinaya unfortunately couldn't make it here today, but she was one of our junior leadership members who edited in Telugu Wikipedia. Telugu, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the languages in India. And she edited, well, no, she translated completely ride sharing, privacy, and social profiling into Telugu. But as I mentioned before, people don't need to be fully fluent to join the project. Vinaya was very comfortable with Telugu, but I do remember that she was also asking a family member to help her with that. So that's just sort of an example of, people reaching out, asking for help. Vinaya also made a toolkit for editing in Telugu Wikipedia. She was suggesting translation notes. For instance, I guess there is no term for and, as in the conjunction, in Telugu. So she was suggesting terms to use there. And she also described some laws in India related to privacy, since that can be a reflection of how Indian culture views it.
All right, so now we'll briefly discuss some of the extensions of our IRGP work. First one being our Wikipedia editathons, and these are kind of twofold events. We hold them in two different ways. One, we do in-lab Wikipedia editathons, where as a lab we come together, choose an article to either start or edit and add to. And then we have our campus-wide editathons, which are something we open up to the greater UC Berkeley campus. And I'll touch on that after I talk about the in-lab editathons first. And we really wanted to talk about two of the articles that we worked on. So the first was we edited and added a lot to the article on LaTanya Sweeney. She is the Daniel Paul Professor of the Practice of Government and Technology at the Harvard Kennedy School and in the Harvard Faculty of Arts and Science. In addition to working on her article, we founded the article on the late Teresa Miller, who is a longtime UB faculty member who served as professor of law and the vice provost for inclusive excellence. At the time of her death in August of 2021, she was the senior vice chancellor for strategic initiative and the chief diversity officer at SUNY. So it was a really cool opportunity to contribute to the Wikipedia articles on these two incredible women as a lab and have that as one of our legacies that we've done together. For our greater Wikipedia events that we hold at UC Berkeley. These were more of an opportunity for us to teach both about the lab and about Wikipedia itself. So we invited anybody with any experience with Wikipedia to come in, learn about editing, and edit as much or as little as they felt comfortable with on the Wikipedia platform. And we did these as partnerships with the UC Berkeley Libraries, the American Culture Center, and the Art Plus Feminism and Race Plus Justice cultural programs. So these were really cool experiences as well.
Another extension of the Wikipedia projects is the lab's annotation database project. This is a project working to create a database of all the lab-generated annotations written by both current and former lab members. And the goal for this project is for this database to be a resource for both current lab members and also outside academics to be able to aid in their search for finding useful and credible sources based on the annotations we wrote. So these annotations accompany lab members' bibliographies when they're looking for sources for their Wikipedia articles. And so alongside an ASA citation, they'll write a paragraph which essentially reviews the article. So it'll include the author's main points, the author's purpose, whether the reader thought that it was a reliable or credible source, how that article may be useful for others or who the intended audience may be, and also how this article could be useful for that student in their own Wikipedia article. And so this is just another format of bringing sort of the knowledge behind the firewall to the public again. And so far, we've had almost 2,000 annotations written over the years, so it'll be really exciting when this database launches.
So now we'll talk a little bit about the impact of our work. As you can see on the slide, we're approaching 1 million words added. And we have had 263 million views on our articles that we have either created or edited. According to Wiki Education, we are the #3 academic Wikipedia editing initiative. And also, we are the largest, most diverse, most consistent, and longest running group of women and women of color who are editing Wikipedia. So with all of that, we have been pretty fortunate to receive a few awards. First, we received the Digital Pedagogy Trailblazer Award from the Center for Teaching and Learning of UC Berkeley in 2018. Then in 2019, we received the American Association of Colleges and Universities Kate Patricia Cross Future Leaders Award, as well as the UC Berkeley Chancellor's Award for Public Service with a special citation for communities of color. And then next week, Naniette is about to accept the award for the UC Berkeley Outstanding Graduate Student Peer Mentor Award. So
I got comfortable. I forgot I had to say something. So what's next for IRGP / CRL? We are in the process of figuring out how to port ourselves from Berkeley to whatever next. So I am at the behest of my university graduating. So that's going to happen in the fall. Excuse me, next spring. Yeah, no, thank you. Please clap for that. Yeah. It's been a long time. Yeah. You know, we've been very fortunate to attract grants and funding from a few organizations and from the university, and are figuring out you know, what this might be outside of a focus just on the Berkeley community. And I suspect Savannah and Ash will continue to be a big part of those discussions, and Ava. They have been pushing for me for many years to actually submit the grant proposal that they wrote to think about the expansion of our work. And whatever it is that comes next for us, at the very least, it will include these 6 incredible people. But there are now hundreds of alums from our lab that remain sort of rabidly committed to this work, and I'm very proud to work with all of them. Is that all? Thank you. To the Center for Information Integrity here at UB, the Wiki Education Foundation, the UC Berkeley Library, the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues, the Office of the Dean at the UC Berkeley Graduate School. These are some of the folks that were the first to fund us or give us office space so that this sort of fledgling group of people trying to do something cool could meet. And we all know how hard it is to find permanent space, so it's a big deal. The SMART program, Berkeley Sociology Department, and Haas School of Business.